From the editors of Cook's Illustrated magazine, it's America's Test Kitchen. With your host, Christopher Kimball. Featuring Test Kitchen chefs Julia Collin-Davison, Bridget Lancaster, Becky Hayes, with Adam Reed in the equipment corner and Jack Bishop in the tasting lab. Discover the secrets of America's foremost food testers and tasters today on America's Test Kitchen. Today on America's Test Kitchen, Bridget reveals the Test Kitchen method for making the best chili at home. Then, Julia shows Chris how to create the ultimate pub-style burger. Finally, Adam reviews meat grinders in the equipment corner. That's all right here on America's Test Kitchen. America's Test Kitchen is brought to you by DCS by Fisher & Paykel. America's cooks rely on innovation and culinary precision. DCS by Fisher & Paykel, offering premium indoor and outdoor kitchen appliances.
And by Kohler, inspiring home chefs to create a professional-level kitchen with innovative sinks, faucets, and cook centers. Kohler.
And by Diamond Crystal Salt for the professional chef and those who want to cook like one. Diamond Crystal, the gourmet choice. By Cooking.com, an online retailer for the kitchen enthusiast. If it's not in your kitchen, try ours. By Plum Amazins, diced dried plums from Sunsweet for amazing recipes. By Miracle Grow, the gardener's friend. And by Chateau Saint Michel.
We are starting from scratch, folks, to make our own version of the very best chili.
That's right, our own ultimate chili. From beans to meat, everything is going to be the best that we can do. It's a great, great stew. All right, so let's start off with the beans. Now, of course, it's the ultimate chili. There's not going to be any canned beans. We're going to cook the beans. That way they can get a lot more flavor. So we're starting off with dried beans, and I've got here, these are just plain old pinto beans, and this is a ½ pound, which works out to about a cup. So I've got 3 tablespoons of just regular table salt into the 4 quarts of water. And the beans, again, that's a ½ pound. If you could just crank the heat to high, let this come to a boil, and after it comes to a boil, I'm going to have you just take it off the burner, put the lid on. We're going to let this soak for an hour, let that salt and water work its way into the center of the bean. All right, we are going to make our own chili powder. These are ancho chilies. Now, ancho chilies don't have a lot of heat. They're quite sweet. They have a little bit of a smoky flavor that's great, and they are the traditional base for most chili powder. Now, this is 1 3/4 ounce, and that might mean 2 giant ancho chilies. It might mean 4 to 6. It's better to go by weight. But what we want to do is get rid of the stem and any of the seeds inside, because we're going to grind this down. We want a nice, fine chili powder. So just cut off the top, and you can actually rip this open. It's kind of like leather. All right, so now what I'm going to do is bring out more flavor. You mentioned that we are going to improve the flavor of these chilies, and I'm going to do that. I'm just going to tear this into rough pieces, about 3/4 inch pieces. Put them right in a large skillet. If I see any seeds, I'll just take them right out. All right, so we're going to put the heat on medium-high. There we go. And we're going to let these toast in the skillet. It's really going to bloom their flavors. We're going to let it sit on the heat for about 4 to 6 minutes. We're going to stir it around quite a bit to make sure that they're not burning or scorching. All right, so these are nicely toasted. You can actually smell them. They're quite fragrant. We're going to go ahead and put this right in our food processor. This is what we're going to make our chili powder in. Now, I mentioned ancho chilies don't have a lot of spice. Well, here is where the spice comes in. These little suckers, these are arbol chilies, okay? But we also want to get rid of the seeds and the stems. The seeds are where a lot of the heat is, so. Now, our recipe calls for 2 to 4, but I know they're hot. I'm going to use 2 for you, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and put these right into the food processor, along with the anchos. Now we've got our spices here. I've got 2 teaspoons of ground cumin and 2 teaspoons of dried oregano and 2 teaspoons of cocoa powder. It adds a nice, warm, deep flavor. It doesn't have any sweetness. We're gonna add sweetness later on. It really gives balance to the chili. And that's one of the reasons that chili is so great overall. It has this great balance of flavors. This is a ½ teaspoon of salt. And here's the interesting ingredient, cornmeal. So we're going to use this as a thickener instead of flour. Flour kind of dulls the flavor, and actually, really authentic chili often uses masa harina as a thickener. Well, we didn't want to go out and buy a giant bag of masa harina.
Which is corn flour.
That's right, it's corn flour. And what we found was if we could use plain old cornmeal, as long as we ground it up pretty fine in with our spice mixture. I'm going to process this until it's very finely ground. That's going to take between 1 to 2 minutes. All right, so let's take a look at this, and you can see that it's finely ground, nice floury powder.
Can I have a little sniff?
Oh, be careful. Full of flavor, that is for sure.
That's good.
That's what we want.
Snuff.
All right, so I'm going to turn the machine back on. I'm going to pour a half cup of chicken broth. This is low sodium, just canned chicken broth, right through the feed tube. It's going to make a spice paste, and that's only going to take about 20, 30 seconds at the max. I'm going to scrape as much of this that I can into a little small bowl. We're going to add it later on. All right, so there we go. Now, I'm going to put this right back on because we're going to make quick work of chopping our vegetables. All right, so I've got 2 medium onions, chopped them about 3/4 inch pieces. Put that right in. I'm going to pulse this. About 4 1-second pulses should do it. We just want to cut these down a little bit. I'm going to add in 3 jalapenos. Again, we want to get rid of the stem and the seeds. And I also want to get rid of any of these ribs inside. So, easy way to do this is to just kind of crush this. You can actually pop it inside out as well. Sometimes you can actually remove them with your hands. If not, you can always use a paring knife or a chef's knife to get in there and trim away any of that white part. It's a little bit bitter. And so you can really see that we're going for a whole bunch of different flavors here. We've got the ancho chilies, which give a nice warm spice. We've got the darbal chilies, very spicy, and then jalapenos, which have a nice fresh flavor to them. 3 jalapenos, and they go along with the onions. 4 more 1-second pulses should do it. So it kind of looks like a really rough salsa. And I'll just transfer this. All right, beans are soaking. They probably still have another 40 minutes to go.
Okay.
So after that, we can come back and assemble the chili. All right, so Chris, it's time, finally, to start putting this chili together. And I've got here the brined beans, already drained. I've got 1 tablespoon of vegetable oil in this Dutch oven. It's heated up nicely. I'm gonna dump this right in. I'm gonna put you in charge of watching this. Cook those 7 to 9 minutes, nice and softened.
I think I can handle this.
All right, I know you can.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about beef. Star of the show. Now we didn't want to use a ground beef chili. We wanted nice big chunks of meat. This is a beef stew. And you know, when we think of beef stew, we often go for a chuck eye roast. Tons of fat, marbling, tons of flavor. But it was actually kind of time consuming to break down that big old roast, and you know, we're doing a bit of work already. So instead, we chose to use blade steaks. Again, they're from the shoulder region, just like the chuck eye roast are. These are about 3/4 inch thick, and this is perfect. So you want 3.5 pounds of blade steaks. And we've already cut these up into 3/4 inch pieces. So we've got a few other things that we're gonna add into those vegetables. I've got 4 cloves of garlic, minced. So we just want to cook it until it's nice and fragrant. Stir, 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 Chris.
Oh.
That smells great. So let's add some more ingredients. Got our chili paste. Scrape that right in there. Should really start smelling this now. And 1 14.5 ounce can of diced tomatoes. We like the texture of the diced tomatoes. And this has their juice in it. And for a little bit of sweetness to balance out the flavors, we're going to add molasses. It's there to temper the heat from the chilies and also the acidity, in this case, from the tomatoes. So it's a nice balance of flavors.
And we do have some tomatoes, which will annoy some people, but not too many.
Yes.
There's a modest amount of
It
tomatoes.
doesn't annoy me, so
Okay.
who cares? Looks great. We can add 2 more cups of low sodium chicken broth right in. Keep stirring, Chris. And we'll go ahead and put the beans in. Once it's at a simmer, if you could turn down the heat and just maintain a really nice low simmer. In the meantime, we're gonna work on the beef. First thing I wanna do is just pat all this beef dry with paper towels. That way we can ensure that we're gonna get a nice sear. And while I'm doing that, I'm gonna go ahead and heat 1 tablespoon of vegetable oil. If you could put that over medium-high heat for me. This is a teaspoon of salt. Pretty aggressively seasoned. It's a lot of beef. All right, so I can tell that the oil is nicely heated. I'm starting to see a few wisps of smoke. That's a good thing. So I'm going to sear off half of this beef. I'm going to do it in 2 batches because I don't want to overcrowd the pan. And it's actually going to look a little bit overcrowded as it is, but that's okay. That's why we really preheated the oil in the pan. Super hot. All right, so I'm going to leave this alone for a couple of minutes because right now it's sticking to the bottom of the pan. If I go to turn it, it just doesn't want to turn, so it's stuck there. After a couple of minutes, the meat will release from the skillet. I'll be able to turn it, make sure it's browned on all sides, and that's going to take about 10 minutes. So I'd call that well browned, wouldn't you?
I would say that was well done.
That means tons of flavor, and this beef is ready to go into the chili pot. But the problem with browning in a separate pan, there's all this fond left, or flavorful bits, in the bottom of the skillet. That means tons of flavor. So we're going to deglaze this, and our beverage of choice for that is just a plain old American lager. We're gonna add half this 12-ounce bottle.
We tried stout.
We sure did. It gets really, really bitter. And red wine just tastes too fruity and sweet. Coffee tasted great at the beginning, but it kept getting darker and more bitter as it cooked. So just a plain old lager. All right, so when I'm sure that I've got every last bit of that fond, I'll go ahead and pour this right into the chili. And I'll scrape all this in there. And now we're just gonna repeat again and cook this second batch of beef. Beef goes into the pot, and we'll deglaze the pan with the rest of the beer. Let's put this right in the pot. Bring it up to a simmer. Let's crank the heat just a moment. So if you could put the lid on, thank you very much, and open the door for me. I am going to put this in a 300-degree oven for about 1.5 to 2 hours until the meat is very tender. And it's not going to take that long because remember, the meat is slightly smaller than we usually have it for beef stew. Well, this batch of chili was done. The meat was really nice and tender after about 1.5 hours. So I took it out, uncovered it, and let it sit for about 10 minutes. So this is what it looks like. I mean, give me a break. That looks awesome. Look how tender that is. Nice big bowl, a little bit more.
Yeah.
There you go. And we have several different condiments. So I've just got a little bit of sour cream on mine, a little bit of Monterey Jack cheese. You could also use cheddar. We've got some cilantro and a little bit of lime.
Now it's time for the meat.
That's right.
First of all, it is really thick and rich.
And tender.
And hot. Boy, that is really good.
It's such a good balance. It's got that little bit of sweet, a little bit of heat too.
The secret for great deep flavor is making our own chili paste, 2 dried chilies, 1 fresh. Now, we should just say, the people out there don't like beans, they don't like tomatoes. We used a little bit of both, and then a lot of blades take over 3 pounds in nice small pieces. Everything gets finished in the oven for about 2 hours. You get a nice, rich, deep, dark chili. So there you have it for America's Test Kitchen, your kitchen.
A fabulous recipe for our all-time favorite chili.
Here at America's Test Kitchen, we asked a bunch of volunteers to come in and take a taste test. We made 2 groups of burgers, one with home ground meat, one with store ground meat, and we're going to have them blind taste them to see if they can tell the difference. Beth, are you a fan of hamburgers?
I am, big fan.
Okay, well, this is going to be easy for you then. We just have 2 little burgers, and we want you to taste the 2, take your time, and tell us what you think about them. I can see that you are an experienced hamburger eater just by the way you attack it.
I know what I'm doing.
Well, I can already tell you the depth of flavor is significantly better in B. I'm going to take another couple bites, though.
Please, have as much as you like.
I think B's the winner.
Burger B is getting a thumbs up.
B.
I think B, there was definitely something additional in B. It was definitely more flavorful.
More juicy, more delicious, more taste to it.
It's really juicy. It feels like there's a lot of fat content in it, and it's
And that's a good thing, right?
a good thing. Makes it better.
A is store ground beef, and B, we brought it home and ground it up ourselves.
Really?
Yeah.
That's the only difference.
Yeah.
Wow. Never would have guessed that.
Would you grind beef at home to make your hamburger?
If that's the difference between it, absolutely I would, yeah.
A is store ground meat, and B is meat that we brought home and ground up ourselves.
No.
Yeah, would you do that?
No.
Also, grounding makes a difference.
It does seem to make a difference.
Wow. Well, it's definitely tastier.
Okay, Chris, the people have spoken, and they want home ground meat in their burgers. My work is done. The rest is up to you.
Thanks, Doc. Now we've proven that buying ground hamburger meat in a supermarket is not the best idea. If you grind your own at home, the taste is much better. We tested a bunch of cuts. What do we like? Well, the #1 cut we love is something called flat meat. This is flat meat. It's 2.5 pound cut. It comes from the bottom part of the sirloin. You can always tell flat meat because it's coarse, has a very coarse texture, has a fair amount of fat in it as well. Very often in a supermarket, though, they'll label steak tips. It's supposed to be flat meat, but it's not. This is such a package, steak tips. But guess what? If you look at the meat, it's very smooth. It doesn't have this coarse texture. So if you see this, it doesn't have that grainy texture. It's not flat meat. Don't buy it. 2 other choices. Boneless short ribs. This is nice. You have to trim out a little bit of the fat. It grinds up very nicely for hamburger. The 3rd choice, not a great choice, is a chuck roast, boneless chuck roast. This is one There's a lot of connective tissue, which does not break down when cooking a hamburger very quickly, so you need to take your knife out and spend a little bit of time trimming it. So that's it. If you want to make a pub-style burger, which you're about to do with Julia, buy flat meat, great flavor, much better than what you can buy in the supermarket.
So now the real difference between a great burger and just an okay one is the meat, of course, and grinding your own meat is where it's at.
Okay.
So the key to grinding meat at home is to first cut it into half-inch pieces, because we're going to put it in the food processor, but if you cut it small to begin with, you wind up with a more even chop. And this is 2 pounds of flat meat. All right, so now we have our strips, and now we're going to take them and then cut them crosswise.
So you basically don't need a food processor.
Taking the couple minutes here to really cut this into half-inch cubes makes a big difference in how even the grind is when you pull it out of the food processor. All right, now, as I mentioned, we're going to use the food processor to grind the meat, because we know everybody has one of those. But even if you're using a meat grinder, it's really helpful to freeze the meat until it's mostly frozen, but just a little bit malleable in the center. All right, so into the freezer for about 35 minutes.
So now I'm going to go visit Adam, the equipment corner, and he's doing a testing of meat grinders. One of my jobs here at America's Test Kitchen is to ask the tough questions. So today's question is, who would want to go out and actually buy a dedicated meat grinder? Well, we often use a food processor. The problem is it takes 30 to 35 pulses. You can only handle about 1/3 of a pound of beef at a time. And of course, you have to freeze the chunks before you use it. So once in a while, it's not a problem. But if you're going to make a lot of sausage or hamburger, as some people do, you might want to invest in the real deal.
It all gets down to how much of a fanatic you are, Chris, about making your own blends for sausages or having the absolute freshest beef for burgers. We found 3 dedicated meat grinders plus 1 meat grinding attachment, that white doohickey right there, for the KitchenAid stand mixer. One of them was manually operated, all the others are electric. The price range was about $40.50 for the manual, up to $200 for one of the electrics. We did 2 tests, one on beef sirloin tips that were frozen until they were firm but not frozen all the way. A second test on pork butt, which was fatty and full of sinew, also partially frozen. We were looking for a couple of things: ease of use, ease of setup, and also efficiency. There were a couple reasons we didn't love the manual grinder. One, it tended to jam up on us if you got a really sinewy piece of meat in there. 2, there was an awful lot of waste. This is actually the auger mechanism from the manual grinder, and you can see stuck on here is all of this really compacted pate-like meat. In fact, we put 2 pounds of beef through here and only got a little more than a pound out because there was all of this waste product. This is from the electric machine. There was a lot less waste. We got nearly the full 2 pounds out of this one. We actually liked the electric one the best. This is the Waring Pro professional meat grinder. It flew through all of the meat, great texture, pretty easy to set up. It was loud, but it's also expensive. It was $200. The good news is that we can recommend these other ones as well. This one is the Maverick Mince Master. It was a little tricky to set up, and it was quieter, in fact, than the Waring, and it's also $90, so it's less than half the price. And if you have the stand mixer already, the $48.75 grinding attachment did a fine job, with the benefit that that is dishwasher safe, whereas you have to hand wash all of these other ones.
So for once, we have a lot of choices, and the first is if you already have a KitchenAid standing mixer like this one, you can buy the meat grinding attachment for 45 bucks. If you want to spend a little less than 100 bucks, go with the Maverick, a little harder to set up. But the ultimate one is 200 bucks, and that's Waring Pro. Does a great job, gets almost all of that meat through the grinder into your burger.
So our meat's been in the freezer for about a little over half an hour, and you can see it's mostly frozen, but still just a little malleable right in the center.
Okay.
And that's exactly what you're looking for. So now we're going to grind it, and we're going to grind it in batches to make sure you get an even grind. So I've made 4 portions here. I'm going to sprinkle the frozen meat into the food processor, and I'm going to pulse it. It takes about 30 pulses to get that pretty evenly ground to about a 1/16 of an inch piece.
You had one of those great meat grinders, of course, it would be a lot easier, right?
Yeah. Food processor does a really great job, too. Just takes a little longer. All right, now this looks pretty good. And then without really touching the meat, I'm going to dump it out onto a second sheet pan over here. All right, now I'm going to continue to pulse the rest of this meat in batches until it's all nicely ground. All right, and that is the last batch of meat. First thing I'm going to do is look for any pieces of sinew or pieces of meat that didn't get evenly ground. And I have to say, this looks pretty clean.
One of the advantages of flat meat is that it's nice and clean. You don't have those connected bits.
That's right. But also the problem with flat meat is it's pretty lean. So what we're going to do is add a little bit more fat, bring that fat content back up to what chuck would be. And this is 4 tablespoons of melted butter. This is a teaspoon of black pepper. And then we're just going to toss it with a fork to combine it. And you can see that butter has started to congeal into little bits of fat that really replicate beef fat. Now we're going to shape our burgers. So you want to portion it into 4 equal-sized burgers. And the easiest way we found to make a burger is to first make sort of a loose meatball and then just to press it into a patty. We want a patty that's about 3/4 of an inch thick, and it should measure about 4.5 inches around. And if you could, please, start heating up that skillet. And there's a teaspoon of vegetable oil you could add to the pan. And you know the pan's good and hot when that oil begins to smoke, and that can take a couple minutes. And remember, you need to fit 4 of these in a 12-inch skillet, so the size is pretty important. Also, the thickness is important because you don't want them to overcook. All right, so there are our 4 burgers. You're gonna season liberally with salt. We found the salt actually made the meat just a little bit more tough when you add it in the burger, so adding it just before cooking is the way to go. That skillet looks like it's just smoking, so I'm gonna lay the burgers into the pan. You definitely don't want to skimp on the skillet being hot enough because these burgers don't take very long to cook, so the hotter the skillet, the better the crust they'll get on the outside. Okay. Oh, and that's our timer. 2 minutes on the first side. Now we're gonna flip them over. Oh. All right, and that's 2 minutes on the second side. And the next thing I'm going to do before we put it in the oven is transfer it to a clean, cool baking sheet. We, of course, tried just shoving the skillet in the oven, which is what you'd think you'd do normally. But the heat of this skillet really made the burger cook unevenly and kept that gray band of meat, which is what we're trying to avoid. So by putting it onto a cool skillet, you avoid that, and the burger cooks more evenly. So this is 4 ounces of good blue cheese. This part's optional, but I knew you like blue cheese. All right, so into a 300-degree oven for only 3 to 5 minutes. What we're looking for is an internal temperature of 125 degrees. That's how you know they're medium rare. Perfect. And of course, if you wanted them a little more well done, you could leave them in there a little longer, but I like medium rare, and I have a sense you like medium rare too.
Yeah, or rare for burgers, yes,
oh,
that's
yeah.
true.
So now I'm gonna take them off the hot baking sheet and transfer them to a plate and just let them rest for about 5 minutes before we eat them. While we wait, I'm gonna make a little burger sauce. And this is 3/4 of a cup of mayonnaise, 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, a tablespoon of dark brown sugar, a tablespoon of Worcestershire, a tablespoon of minced chives, a minced garlic clove, and 3/4 of a teaspoon ground pepper. We're big fans of burger sauce in the test kitchen. I feel like this one is my favorite. So we toasted our hamburger buns in a warm oven just for a little bit. And a burger for you. A burger for me. And I also took the liberty of frying up some shallots, which are really good with the blue cheese.
There is the basic rule, never eat anything bigger than your head, you know, which, remember that expression?
I think your head's a little bigger than that,
It may be,
though.
but I don't know.
Oh.
No, that's a little rare inside, which is the way I like it.
Yeah.
The more you cook it, the tougher meat gets. You know?
Yeah. Well, this meat's so tender because, of course, we ground it ourselves.
The word transcendent comes to mind. Can you say that about a burger, a transcendent burger? Oh, okay. It's transcendent.
Oh, that's good. Just that clean, meaty flavor with the blue cheese and the shallots.
Outstanding, super terrific, supercalifragilistic. Really, really excellent. Well, fabulous pub-style burgers start with a little bit of work. You have to go out and grind your own meat. We like flat meat. We cut it into pieces, froze it briefly, ground it, and then we added a little melted butter to it. Salt on the outside, cooked it 2 minutes aside in a skillet, then on a baking sheet into the oven, 3 to 5 minutes just to finish them off. And there you have it, a great sauce as well. So for America's Test Kitchen to your kitchen, the best pub-style burger you'll ever eat. You can get this recipe, all of our recipes from this season, at our website, americastestkitchentv.com. You can also get our tasting results, testing results, and you can watch selected episodes of our show. You can also join us on Twitter and Facebook. This is, you know, just for this recipe, it'd be worth it.
Yeah, I agree. This is the best burger.
You're the best.
America's Test Kitchen is brought to you by DCS by H3r3's. America's cooks rely on innovation and culinary precision. DCS by H3r3's, offering premium indoor and outdoor kitchen appliances.
For over 50 years, Miracle-Gro products have helped home chefs grow fresh vegetables and herbs. Miracle-Gro soils and plant foods provide the essential nutrients plants need to grow bountiful produce. Gardening tips are available online at miraclegro.com.
By Cooking.com, an online retailer for the kitchen enthusiast. If it's not in your kitchen, try ours. Chateau Saint Michel. Digital wine cellar and pairings can be found online. And by Kohler. Diamond Crystal Salt, the gourmet choice. Plum Amazins from Sunsweet.